All right, y'all, welcome to the show. We got a huge one lined up for you today. So in just a second, war with Iran is here, and I'm about to show you the incredible parallels between this war and the Iraq war. It really is stunning. It's like that movie Groundhog Day, where the same guy lives the same day over and over and over, and it's like a nightmare. This is horrific, except this time, this war might be the end of America, and that's not hyperbole. So we'll talk about that. We also have nuclear threats have officially been issued. I'll give you the details there. We have Democrats revolting over Trump's warmongering and trying to reel him in through Congress. We have Fox News going full bloodthirsty and demanding war with Iran, just wall-to-wall war boner propaganda. We have Bernie Sanders torching Netanyahu. We have a New York City politician running for mayor assaulted by ICE simply for demanding a warrant. And it's all on video, and we have the video for you here. Then later on, Trump's disgustingly evil reaction to Tim Walz after Democratic politicians got murdered by a MAGA terrorist in Minnesota. And we have Tucker humiliating Ted Cruz directly to his face, which is a glorious clip. I can't wait for you guys to see that. So we'll jump into it in a second. Everybody, you know the drill. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps out big time and costs you nothing at all. Thank you to everybody who supports the show on Patreon. We literally could not do it without you. This is real independent media. You guys support this show $2 a month at a time, $5 a month at a time. I've never talked to an advertiser. I never will talk to an advertiser. I've never done an ad read. This is real independent media, not like the fake independent media outlets out there. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Everybody also subscribe to the Corin's World YouTube channel where we drop Kyle and Corin episodes. I know that he's really happy with the sub growth he's seen. We're trying to get him to 100,000 subscribers. And subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends, because this week we're going to have an amazing debate. We're having on Cenk Uygur to debate. Have Crystal and I been too tough on MAGA? So we'll talk about that. You don't want to miss that. Sign up for Crystal, Kyle, and Friends below. All right, guys, let's get it. So this video has gone viral again lately because Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted regime change in Iran since literally the 1980s. And he's tried 1,000 different lies to get us to that point and to get America to do his dirty work for him. But here he is in 2002, testifying in front of a House committee, and he talks about the Iraq war and the need to take out Saddam Hussein. But the most important part here is to take note of how everything this man says turned out to be dead wrong. Let's watch.
And this is a tyrant who is feverishly trying to acquire nuclear weapons. And today the United States must destroy the same regime, because a nuclear-armed Saddam will place the security of our entire world at risk. It is simply not reflecting the reality to assume that Saddam isn't feverishly working to develop nuclear weapons as we speak. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Can you imagine? The exact opposite happened. We had the rise of ISIS because we toppled Saddam. We destroyed the region. Also, it was a total lie that he was even building nuclear weapons. Every part of this, dead wrong.
Of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location. The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's: winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier, less than dismantling his regime will do. Because Saddam's nuclear program has fundamentally changed in those 2 decades. He no longer needs one large reactor to produce the deadly material necessary for atomic bombs. He can produce it in centrifuges the size of washing machines that can be hidden throughout the country. And I want to remind you that Iraq is a very big country. It is not the size of Monte Carlo. It is a big country. And I believe that even free and unfettered inspections will not uncover these portable manufacturing sites of mass death.
So in a world that made sense, every word this man says for the rest of his life would be discounted. Because every single thing was wrong here. He was clearly desperately trying to get the U.S. to do his dirty work for him and overthrow Saddam. Saddam had nothing to do with 9/11 at all. He was not building a nuclear weapon. And of course, the war in Iraq, as everybody acknowledges now, was a total disaster. Well, guess what? All the people telling you that the war with Iran will be a total disaster, they're right today. And he's also wrong again. So here is General Wesley Clark, and he lets the truth slip here in 2007, explaining what the goal of the neocons who were in power at the time, what their goal was in the long run. Because this is a nefarious subplot going on, which is steering all of U.S. foreign policy. Here's what he says.
10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Wow. Long-term, long-standing plan that they're clearly still rolling out. Shout out to The Daily Show for putting together this compilation. This isn't even every time he said, "Oh, Iran is a couple months from getting a nuclear weapon." This is only some of the times he said this. Watch.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
If not stopped.
So let's also point out that obviously all of this is untrue. But the implication here is, well, if Iran gets a nuke, obviously they're going to launch on Cleveland immediately. And that's just total horseshit. This is the same sort of thing they did with the war in Iraq. They implied heavily, or and in some circumstances outright said, "Oh, if Saddam has a nuke, he's going to attack us." That was all made up. Guys, Kim Jong-un of North Korea has nukes. Has he nuked anybody yet? No. Effectively, he has it, and it serves as a deterrent. So now, the West can't overthrow him because that would mean he'd launch on Seoul, South Korea, and kill hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so they know, all right, we can't really do anything. Like, we just have to deal with the existence of the state of North Korea. And it's a similar circumstance here, that if Iran had nukes, it would be to establish deterrence to make it so that Israel can't overthrow them and the U.S. can't overthrow them. Because as we speak right now, who's waging more wars, Iran or Israel? Well, Israel's literally doing a genocide in Gaza as we speak, killing hundreds of people per day. They're bombing Lebanon. They're bombing Yemen. They're bombing Syria and taking over large swaths of Syria. They're taking over parts of the West Bank. They just did a total siege on the West Bank. So every part of the narrative from top to bottom is just completely and utterly wrong. Now, again, we are at the point in this propaganda buildup to war with Iran where you have some of the exact same arguments that are being trotted out that were used against Saddam Hussein. So here is George W. Bush in the lead up to the Iraq War. This is incredible, guys. Listen to what he says here.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy. You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear.
Now, again, remember, in retrospect, everybody knows the Iraq War was stupid. The Iraq War was based on lies. The Iraq War destroyed the region, led to thousands of our own troops dying, led to all these problems. The Middle East was broken. The rise of ISIS, every single part of it from top to bottom was a failure. This was the argument that was deployed at the time to try to make people shut up and fall in line. And if you criticize the war, what they would do is say, "Why are you criticizing the troops? Why do you hate the troops? Why do you hate the United States of America? Poop face, poop." Well, guess what? Just like George W. Bush said this year, now we got Mark Levin, the man with the most annoying voice on TV, by the way, and he's out there making this exact same argument.
Yeah, so where are they? They're nowhere. How about China? Nowhere. How about Russia? Nowhere. What happened to World War III? There is no World War III. They all sound like a bunch of Marxist Islamists. They don't sound like patriotic Americans. Let me be clear. This is good versus evil. You're either a patriotic American who's going to get behind the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, or you're not.
You're either with us or you're with the terrorist. You're either a patriotic American that gets behind the president, or you're not. The exact same playbook. By the way, look at this. Tulsi Gabbard, the head of intelligence, came out, I believe it was in March, and said the intelligence community has come to the conclusion that Iran is not building a nuke. That's what she said. Well, Trump was just asked about that, and he goes, I don't care what she says. I don't care what she says. I say they are close to a nuke. So she can go away. There was some snide comment just swatting aside the conclusion of his own intelligence agencies. Well, now further validation on that. Israel built its case for war with Iran on new intelligence. The U.S. didn't buy it. American spy agencies stand by their assessment that Iran hasn't decided to build a nuclear weapon, but Trump now says Tehran is very close. So our own intelligence agencies are now leaking to the media. They're not building a fucking nuke. And Trump's like, I don't care. I want to go to war anyway. This is incredible. And in some ways, this is the mirror image of what happened in 2003, where you had U.S. intelligence saying, or at least rogue elements within U.S. intelligence saying, Iraq does have a nuke. And then you had Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and all these assholes go out there and aggressively make the case for 2 years, by the way, that, we have to overthrow Saddam because he's a direct threat to us. I got another example, though. This is what Ted Cruz said just yesterday about war with Iran. And then you're going to see it compared to what George W. Bush said in 2002 about Iraq. Again, this is incredible.
If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, I think the odds are unacceptably high that we would find out with a mushroom cloud over New York City or Los Angeles.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
History repeats itself. Literally the exact same bullshit talking points. And people expect you to believe this. People expect you to break out the pom-poms and go, hooray, regime change in Iran, yippee skippy. What are we doing, bro? But now here's the thing, right? People are like generally pointing out, yeah, the war in Iraq was bad. But very few people actually get into the details and the specifics of just how horrible it was. Now understand, Iraq at the time was a country of about 25 million people. Iran is a country of 90 million people. Iran is much more developed, much bigger, much more powerful. And so it led to a massive crisis, a refugee crisis, death, destruction, money wasted, lives wasted. The war in Iraq led to all that. This is going to be even worse. So, you ready for this? The staggering cost of the last decade's U.S. war in Iraq. This is an article that goes all the way back to 2014. So this is over a decade ago. So these numbers are actually worse today because we still have a lot of troops in the region, okay? But look at these numbers. How many direct war deaths, which doesn't include the hundreds of thousands more that died due to war-related hardships. How many direct war deaths were there for the war in Iraq? 189,000 as of a decade ago. There were 32,223 troops that were injured. That doesn't include PTSD. There were 134,000 civilians killed directly in Iraq. How many people have died in Iraq since the invasion that wouldn't have died had the invasion not occurred? That number is 655,000. You have 150 reporters who were killed. You have 2.8 million people who remain either internally displaced or have fled the country. You have 1.7 trillion is the amount in war expenses spent by the U.S. Treasury Department as through fiscal year 2013. It was 1.7 trillion as of over a decade ago. Ladies and gentlemen, when you take the war on terror in its totality, we're talking about over $6 trillion spent. Imagine what that could have bought here at home. Everybody could have health care. Everybody could have college. Everybody could get a social security check. Here's how much the war cost per second. $5,000 per second. $350,000 is the cost to deploy just one American military member. $490 billion is the amount in war benefits owed to war veterans. $7 trillion is the projected interest payment due by 2053 because the war was paid for with borrowed money. $20 billion is the amount paid to KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root. They're a contractor responsible for equipment and services. So understand something, there was massive war profiteering. $3 billion is the amount of KBR payments the Pentagon auditors consider, quote, questionable. Tee-hee, we just lost $3 billion. Oops, our bad. War is a racket. People profiteer off this shit. This is why you want to talk about real waste, fraud, and abuse in government? You only talk about the Pentagon. They failed 7 audits in a row. They can't account for over 60% of their money. Where's that money going? Where do you think that money's going? $60 billion is the amount that was paid for reconstruction, which was ruled largely a waste due to corruption and shoddy work. $4 billion is the amount owed to the U.S. by Iraq before the invasion. $1.6 million is the gallons of oil used by U.S. forces each day in Iraq. $12 billion is the cost per month of the war by 2008. $12 billion per month. $7 billion is the amount owed to Iraq by the U.S. after the war, mostly due to fraud. $20 billion is the annual air conditioning cost. Just flat out missing $546 million in spare parts, 190,000 guns, including 110,000 AK-47s. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the weaponry that was picked up by jihadists, by Al-Qaeda, by ISIS. 40% is the increase in Iraqi oil production. Oh, interesting. Look at that. $85 billion is the revenue from Iraqi oil in 2011. $150 billion is the amount oil companies are expected to invest in oil development over the next decade. $75 billion is the approximate amount expected to go to American subcontracting companies, largest of all Halliburton, who Dick Cheney worked for, and then he left and got an exit bonus of millions and millions of dollars. Then he gives them a no-bid contract, and oh, would you look at that? They make $75 billion. Incredible. And then, most importantly, ready? Zero, which is the nuclear weapons of mass destruction found. Though a bunch of chemical weapons were discovered, but let's be clear, the reason Saddam had those chemical weapons is because we gave them to him at the height of his atrocities against the Kurds. So we armed him and funded him when he was murdering his own people, and then we turned around after the fact and chastised him for murdering his own people and used that as part of the justification to go topple him, even though he did that with our full support at the time. They go on to say here, perhaps most importantly, this list doesn't account for the emotional damage caused to service members and their families, as well as the destruction to the home, social fabric, and psyche of the Iraqi people. As I said, y'all, this article is from over a decade ago. These numbers are even worse now. And they want to do this again with Iran, except with Iran, it would be much, much worse. But the more important point is, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have the social capital, the political capital internationally to do something like this again and come out the other end with the same global order that we have now. In other words, Trump has alienated and isolated every single one of our allies. He launched a trade war against our best friends. He's threatening to invade places like Greenland and Panama and Mexico and Canada, bombing Yemen, bombing Somalia, trying to coup Venezuela. So in this moment, we have tremendous debt, a tremendous deficit. Now that matters because the world is going to slowly move away from the dollar as the world reserve currency. So the debt and the deficit wasn't a big deal before because we're the world reserve currency. So there was always demand for the dollar. So there's always high confidence in the dollar. So we were able to run these massive deficits and we were able to accrue a lot of debt. But now, because Trump is pissing off the rest of the world and making them hate us to an extent that they never have before, now everybody's going to move away from the dollar. No confidence in the dollar. Well, then our debt and our deficits matter, and we can't afford them. And so if we do another war, which leads to numbers like this, a disaster like this, death and destruction like this, it is over for the United States of America. It is over. We will not recover from this. We are handing the Chinese century on a silver platter to President Xi. And Trump is too fucking stupid and incompetent and dumb to realize it. And he's too much of a warmonger to think rationally. And he's also being played like a fiddle by the Israelis. Let's be clear. Here's a guy who is in the Epstein files. There's a tremendous amount of dirt on him. And Epstein was Mossad. Mossad is Israeli CIA. So Israel can go to Trump and say, you better do what we say, or we're releasing the worst of the worst shit we got on you, dog. And we know there's some deep, dark shit of Trump out there. And so now he's diving right into the deep end, and he's become the biggest warmonger of all the warmongers. So this is where we are. War with Iran would be the end of America. It would be the end of America. And remember, this is what these fucking vile, demented cretins are focused on at the same time We have millions of people in this country that don't have health insurance. We have tens of thousands that die every year because they don't have access to basic health care. In fact, Trump's big, beautiful bill would mean another 51,000 deaths a year because of lack of health care, because he's ripping Medicaid away from people. We have massive credit card debt and student loan debt. Jobs don't pay well. Jobs are being outsourced all the time. Under Trump, we lost over 200,000 jobs. Now we're over 315,000 jobs that were outsourced under Trump. So this country is being ripped apart from within. Ripped apart. Basic things don't even fucking work anymore. And what are they focused on? Another massive, illegal, offensive, and aggressive war in the Middle East against a country that didn't attack us and wasn't going to attack us. These are war criminals. Netanyahu needs to be locked up. Trump needs to be locked up. He obviously needs to be impeached. That goes without saying. But we are up shit's creek without a paddle, dog. And unfortunately, it looks like the wheels are already in motion. The fighter jets are in the air. The bombs are in the air. The artillery is in the air. The ships are being sent as well. It looks like it is on like Donkey Kong right now. That Trump has made the decision. Netanyahu has made the decision. Iran is put in a position now where, I mean, shit, they have to take out U.S. bases because they're clearly under assault, and the U.S. and Israel are not going to stop. They might have to try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would lead to global economic calamity and oil prices skyrocketing. But this was all brought to you by the neocon warmongers. And in fact, under Trump, it's even worse than that. These aren't just neocons. These are flat out imperialists. 1800 style imperialists. And they're serving you the apocalypse on a silver platter. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.